I've always felt the vibe of some early 20th century when playing Pathologic, and quarantine gave some more clues about when Pathologic is. I know that being timeless and out of time and out of real life space is kind of the whole point of the Pathologic setting, but why not speculate just for the sole purpose of fun? The first thing that catches your eye is pre revolutionary spelling. I would say that this means that the game takes place before the reform of 1918, but actually it's not that simple. We'll touch upon it later. And what is this reform I'm talking about, you'll probably ask. You see, before the revolution, Russian spelling looked different from what we have today. Here are some examples of the changes. And if we look at signboards in Pathologic, we'll clearly see the pre reform spelling. Speaking about Electro Theater, this is what a cinema was called back then. The very first cinema in Russia was opened in 1896 in St. Petersburg, and it was called The Living Photograph. But the very first place called Theater is believed to be opened in Moscow in 1897. There's one more signboard stating «Приготовительное училище», and I'm not sure about that one. There was no establishment under such term. We can translate it as preparatory school. But there existed preparatory classes which sometimes could be placed as a separate school. Such classes in Russia existed since 1840s. They were special classes to prepare children to enter the first grade of gymnasiums and, since 1888, of secondary education institutions, such as училища. Also, I found that in 1922 a naval preparatory school was established, but in Russian it's called a bit different. Приготовительное училище, военно-морское подготовительное училище. Also, the phrase приготовительное училище is written exactly the same in both pre-reform and post-reform spelling, so we won't take it into consideration here. And there's one more piece of information about these preparatory classes. In 1934, the term приготовительный класс was used to describe a preschool class of children preparing to begin their education. But 1934 is too far on the timeline from the reform. In the beginning of this video, I said that it wasn't that simple with this spelling reform. Yeah, some signboards are written in pre-revolutionary spelling, but all other inscriptions in the game are written with post-reform spelling. The announcement, the schedule, the letter. So Pathologic must take place after 1918, not before it. Why are the signs in the city pre-reform spelling then? Well, maybe the owners didn't have time or money to change them because too little time passed. Some more clues can be found if we look at the schedule. The gaps between periods are insane, by the way. What monster created this schedule? As a person working in education, I'm appalled by this atrocity, though sadly not very surprised. Firstly, some of the surnames given here are real. Most likely, they're referring to real people as an Easter egg of sorts. And at first, I thought of making a separate video about it, but there's not enough information for a separate one, so I'll just tell you about it here. G. Ramon is Gaston Ramon, if I pronounce it correctly. He was a French veterinarian and biologist who in 1920s made a major contribution to the development of effective vaccines for diphtheria and tetanus. S. Kierkegaard is probably Soren Kierkegaard. Once again, it's I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it right. He was a first existentialist philosopher. P. Хлебников is Pyotr Alexeyevich Хлебникov. He was a professor of Imperial Medical and Surgical Academy in St. Petersburg. I didn't find a person under the name Sablinsky, but I found out that there existed educational and scientific station called Sablinskaya, which was a training ground of the Geographical Institute from 1921 to 1925. And I didn't find anything that could go under P. Baichuk. There was a Ukrainian artist by this surname, but his name was Mikhail. And also Aglaya is here. Most of the names of the disciplines here don't lead to anything specific, but for one. This is a name of a real scientific article made by Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. Yeah, the Pavlov, the one with the dog. This article was published on the 3rd of April in 1919 in a Russian physiological journal. It was published under the exact same name as the name of the lecture in the schedule. And the events of pathologic quarantine take place in September, by the way. So, I like to think that pathologic quarantine happened somewhere between September 1919 and something 1922 or 1923. Because you know what else was happening in Russia in 1919, by the way? Apart from revolution and war, of course. There was a huge outbreak of typhus. Some sites give 1918, 1922, and other give 1919, 1923 as dates of the epidemic, but the general timeline fits anyway. It is estimated that about 700,000 people died of it. I'm not saying that typhus and the plague from the game are one and the same disease, otherwise Daniel would have recognized it and would have known what to do with it, but it's just a very nice detail adding to my very speculative theory. So, thanks for watching. Feel free to express your thoughts and theories in the comments.